Hello, Simon. Delighted to be chatting with you. Myself and Stephen Evans here.
Hi,
Hi,
Simon.
Terry.
Pleased to
Yeah,
meet you.
nice, Steve.
Yeah,
Nice to see you.
good to make contact. Finally, I think you've already spoken to Terry a few times. But anyway, I believe you're in lovely, cold Newcastle. It's got to be colder than Liverpool, I bet. Always is on that North Sea, I find. Is it
It's a
cold there
lot.
today?
It's a bit fresh. It's a bit fresh. It's a lot warmer since we got rid of Mike Ashley, though. I'll tell you that.
Hey, much improved on contenders for top four this season.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed.
Didn't he offer one of the? Did he say to one of the supporters, "I'll pay you if you can get Michael Owen off our hands"?
He probably did. He says all sorts of stuff, all sorts of stuff. But I don't even want to think of it. It's like a bad relationship, that you finally got out of. And you just don't want to go back there.
Excellent stuff. Anyway, you're in some decent hands now, by the sounds of it. But whereabouts are you?
There's another story, and bit of a moral issue, but
Yeah.
Saudis.
So whereabouts are you in Geordieland? Then are you near the city centre, Jesmond based, or are you further out? Or
Newcastle a little bit, right?
my sister lived there for many years, so yeah, I'm very familiar with it. Yeah.
All right, I live in South Gosford, so about half a mile from Jesmond.
Oh, cool. Yeah, it's not so far then.
Yeah, it's nice, handy for town. But the thing is, I go to town less and less as the years go by. So,
Yeah, it's quite a tight town, isn't it? I mean, it's a bit hilly and it drops into the city centre, and it's all tight round there. You've got the ground and all the shops, and it all seems very walkable, isn't it? It's all that close knit, And
I do like that. You can get into town on the metro in 10 minutes, get round it in 10 minutes. Yeah. Everything's there, which is handy for me because I've got no sense of direction. I get lost going to the bathroom, so me.
Speaking of which, if you're living in Newcastle and you've got a name like Van der Velde, I'm assuming you must have a Dutch connection, or is that inherited along the way?
A long way away. The story goes, my great grandpa, something like that, maybe some more greats, came over in 1860 to work, fell in love, settled in Newcastle, and here I am.
So we're moving on to we talk about some of your writing. You've won some really prestigious awards for your short stories.
I like you.
As looking at your bio that you've got on your Amazon page, you've got a wide range of past jobs, past occupations, barman, lawyer. As all this range of occupations, has that sort of fed in to the characters and the plots for the short stories?
Well, I mean, look, everything, all your experiences feed in, don't they?
Yeah.
But it's not, occasionally there'll be something like, there's this woman once I worked for, one of the first jobs I had, selling potatoes door to door. And she was, what?
Potatoes?
Wasn't a lot of It wasn't me, I promise you. But I hated her to start with. And she was one of these people who, if I want your opinion, I'll give you it kind of people. And then just after you get to know her, you just realize there's just a little bit of irony underneath it. And she's not really that bad. She's just, that's just her front. And variations of her have turned up in quite a lot of stories. So yeah, there's some characters who I really consciously think, right, yeah, that personality is going to fit. But a lot of the time, it's probably more subliminal. I've met a lot of people, bits of them drop into the books.
Okay.
So which way did it all come about? Did you start off barman and go lawyer, or there's that many different trades in there? I'm trying to work out how your progression started and to get to where you are now.
Well, to be honest, I mean, I had lots of bits of jobs for 3 months here and there. And then I did a law degree because that would open doors and stuff. And then I did advertising because I thought that was more creative, and ended up just frustrated trying to make a living. So I ended up being a lawyer and made some money, but I didn't like it. I think for quite a long time I wanted to write. So when I had enough, I started writing. And the more I write it, you can see I'm good. The more I wrote, the more I resented taking time out to do other things. So anyway, I got to a point where I could do my own thing. Went traveling, teaching English, which gave me more time to write. And now it's just a matter of trying to get everything else out of the way so I can write.
You've done some extensive traveling as well around South America.
Well, yeah. So I worked, like I say, as a solicitor for about probably 12 years. And then when I finally sort of thought, right, I can afford to jump. And so it's like, right, what do I really want to do? So I was always fascinated with, Castro and Che Guevara. So I went to Cuba for a few weeks and wandered around, and that was 2001. So that had just opened up. So it was really good because they didn't really know what to do with tourists. So it wasn't like now I gather it's quite controlled, and you're put in your sort of compound where it's all very safe.
Yeah.
Whereas then, I just went on a bus from one town to the next town, and you'd find somebody there with like a picture of their spare room. And I spoke about 4 words of Spanish, which was obviously not very impressive. And people didn't speak English, but it's you can communicate if you need to. So that was fantastic. And then it was so good that I, the next year or the year after that, I went around Peru, and which was great in a different way. And then I, shortly after that, met my wife and had kids. And no more South America.
Okay, Simon, looking at the books behind you as well, we mentioned that you won numerous awards for the short stories. I started reading the Backstories book today. The opening very short story, the brilliant hook at the end of that. I didn't see that coming whatsoever. The guitar story, the twist at the end, superb.
Yeah. Oh, thanks very much. Yeah. So
not much we can say about it because it'll give it away.
No, exactly. That's the problem with all the backstories. They're all like that. You're just for the benefit of anybody who hasn't read it. I take a famous person who means a lot to me, often from my childhood. So sort of heroes, very famous people, not like someone who's won Strictly, proper famous people from, say, the 60s, the 70s. And try and think about a pivotal moment in their life before they were a hero. Because once people achieve a lot, you think, oh, well, they were always going to be great. But of course, that's not the truth, is it? Yeah. So I try and get really in close with them at that moment and give you the story. And from the reader's point of view, the key to it, of course, is I don't tell you who they are. Yeah. So you're in someone's head. I drop the clues in, like what kind of country we're in, where we are, when we are, what they're into, be it, activism, music, sport, whatever. And gradually the clues get a bit heavier, and until, the penny will drop at some point, possibly on the last line. But as you read more of these stories, you get better at sussing them.
It's in the title, isn't it? Stories about people you think you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So as well as the game of trying to guess who they are, I'm trying to give you a different perspective. So if I tell you, here's a story about Adolf Hitler, to pick a name, you've got a view. So you'll read your story with that view in mind. If I tell you, here's a story about someone you don't know who it is, you'll come at it open. You'll get to the end, and eventually you'll click, oh, it's them. But I didn't know that about them. I didn't see them in that light. And so you've got kind of two different truths to put together. So hopefully it gives you some resonance, something to take away and think about. So I don't know. So did it give you something to take away and think about?
It did. Well, to be honest, the last few lines I was thinking, is this talking about Leonard Cohen? I was just thinking, who is this? But I didn't guess right.
Yeah, but you got it on the last word.
Exactly. Yeah.
Seems quite an original. Yeah, seems quite an original concept to me. It's not something I've thought about before, so it's very interesting, I must admit. But then you go on. Have I got this right? You've got on your website a section called spoilers. So is that something connected with this as well?
Yeah, exactly. So I'd say there's 14 stories in Backstories, all in the same style, famous people. And the first one, because it's the first one, I give you it on a plate at the end of the story if you haven't got it. Basically, the clue tells you who it is. But some of them are not so straightforward, particularly for say, American readers. A couple of my criminals are very British. So basically, depending on what your knowledge is and your experience, there's one or two that some people don't get. So the spoilers are, these are who the characters are. But obviously, if you read it knowing who the characters are, it's a spoiler, isn't it? It spoils some of the story. But at the same time, I have had a lot of people, or a few people, saying, it's driving me mad. Who is this character in number 7? So I put them on the website. And when you have, when you've read Backstories, if you really can't get them, you can go and get the answers.
I mean, the main thing we want to chat about is your latest release, The Silent Brother. Before we talk about that in more detail, you tell us how you connected with Northodox, your publisher.
So, I mean, briefly, I mean, this is a story that I wrote in various forms a few years ago, and I had, I've been right through it all. I mean, I don't know, the whole publishing industry drives me mad. You know, you're sending all this stuff off and you get no response and no response and no response. And then I had a couple of gushy responses of, oh, we love it, it's all going to happen. And it was all going to happen with like quite a big agent and a big publisher. And long story short, it didn't. And eventually I just thought, this is torture. And also it was stopping me writing, because all I was doing was writing submissions and waiting and hoping. So I put it in a drawer, thought I'm going to get on with something else, and got into Backstories. And then it just popped up. I think it might have been on Twitter that Northern publisher specializing in crime were looking at, you know, for real Northern crime set, you know, with the real feel of the North. And I thought, oh, well, that is exactly what I've written. So I thought, right, I'm not going to invest emotionally in it, which is where I went wrong. I was overly invested in, it's going to. So I just sent it off and thought, I'll forget about it. And they came back pretty quickly and said, can we have the full manuscript? So at this point, I'm still trying to be cool about it, but obviously I'm not. And then they came back pretty quickly afterwards and said, yeah, we'd like to publish your book. So it's almost like when you finally stop looking, you know, you find it. So obviously that's great. Yeah, you need luck. I mean, you need the right thing at the right. You know, there's a lot of good writers out there. There's to be fair, I think that, you know, there's a lot of people who are maybe not quite ready to publish. I don't think, you know, they haven't quite got it. But there's a lot of people who are good, and it's a very crowded market. And then obviously agents and publishers are focusing on the other end of it. What can I sell? How can I make some money, because it's their living? And it's got to be, you know, you've got to write the right thing, and you've got to stumble almost across the right person. I mean, researchers, you know, I kind of, when I started out, I thought it was almost like an exam or something, or a competition, and the very best books would be picked up. And I think there's an element of that, but it's not quite like that in the real world, obviously, really. I don't know why I was so stupid as to sort of idealize it in that way. It's about, you've got to hit an agent or publisher who is looking for something, who has contacts in the right sphere, who's looking for your thing and happens to be a bit short of work, and then you hit the right thing at the right time and you get lucky. But as someone famously said, there's also an element, you create your own luck, don't you? So I don't know, it worked. At last it worked. So I'm obviously very pleased.
Billy Elliot meets Sexy Beast.
That's brilliant.
that draws you in straight away. That hooks you, doesn't it? So, bit of brief outline about that without giving anything away or too much away.
No, I mean, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek. I mean, there's various strap lines we've come up with, but Billy Elliot, obviously, young Northern lad who doesn't quite fit into the world he's in. And then Sexy Beast is a kind of quick fire gangster thing. So, I mean, that leads me in to talk about the book. If I can go on about the book for a minute. I mean, basically, that sort of sums up, I think, what I think is great about the book, and what maybe is difficult about the book from a selling it point of view, because it starts off with Tommy, who's our hero, his childhood. So in that sense, it's more of a Billy Elliot-ish. He's growing up in a difficult area of Newcastle. Life's tough. Dad's gone, and his life goes wrong, which I will come back to in a moment. But basically, naturally, someone who grew up in that situation, you're going to meet some of the wrong people. If you want to achieve something, you want to get out, sometimes you're going to break the rules. And if you sometimes break the rules, you get involved with the wrong people, and you end up being pressured into doing things you might not want to do. And so you've got the gangster element. So that to me is a total natural progression. And that's the message of the book, that, this whole business of criminals are bad, but victims are good. Well, there's not such a clear delineation.
Yeah, it's not black and white, is it? Yeah.
No. Even in Newcastle, it's not,
Nice one.
So, but from a publishing point of view, what I found was ultimately, I think the problem was, look, the beginning half is what, and this isn't me saying it because I wouldn't say anything like this, but is basically an agent more or less said to me, look, the beginning half of your book, it's about a kid under pressure. It's a woman's book. It's a kitchen sink kind of drama thing. It's a woman's book.
I wouldn't agree with that. The read
well,
I've had so far.
Yeah. But it's certainly, maybe it's a different market. Maybe that's fair to say. To some people it's a different market. And then the second half of the book is more of a gangster thriller, 100 miles an hour. So it's a little bit like The Goldfinch, if you've read that. Or is that,
no,
have you not?
No.
But anyway, I mean, it's that's what it is. And just to give you the starting point where it all begins, you've got two little boys, Tommy and Benji. Tommy's 5, Benji's 4. Dad's not around. Stepdad's basically a bastard, and social services come to take the boys away, but they find Benji. Tommy's hidden, and Tommy's left behind, and he just feels responsible and guilty, and he's in this terrible situation. He's full of guilt. He's lost his little brother, and then the mum, who's kind of a sympathetic character, but she's not a strong person, and she understandably is distraught, and she starts to drink, and things fall apart even more, and Tommy has to navigate the world. And so you're with him really from the age of 5 to about the age of 25. And that's how the story goes.
Do you know what I like about it? The opening scene, it's brutal and powerful. But what I like is you bring all the senses in. You've got Tommy hiding away in this kitchen sink that smells of a wet dog. It just evokes, it brings the readers into the story to be with the characters. And plus,
thanks for
I'm going off on a tangent, but the one novel I've got out there, the main character's named Tommy. He's struggling, growing up at a working class estate, and he gets into robbery and things just to make ends meet, just to get money to take his girlfriend to the pictures.
Yeah, so but he's a scouser, isn't he?
He's a scouser. It's the same as Geordie's, yeah. But it's my type of read.
Well, you got, you tell it how it is, and it's a real story, and it's a story that is repeated all the time,
There's a German word for that particular type of genre, which I can never remember. So it's a long. I won't even bother attempting to try and pronounce it. But it's about like social realism genre.
Did you struggle then with this the longer form narrative after doing backstories? Because obviously this is a longer book, and you're used to doing these backstories. Did it come easy, or Did you have a plot in your head anyway, and it came naturally?
No, it's funny. Most of Backstories was written after The Silent Brother. Just because, you know, you assume when things come out that, oh, well, that's the order they were written in, but it isn't always so, you know. Silent Brother was in a drawer for 3 or 4 years, and it came out after. But obviously I started off, well, to be honest, the advice I was given when I first started writing was write short stories, don't try and write a novel. So of course I wrote a novel, and it was, you know, and I made all my mistakes, or made some of my mistakes with that. But now, I mean, I like short stories in the sense that you can get the basic essence of it down in a day. So if I can get my head around who I am today, but, you know, whoever it is, if it's Winston Churchill or you know, whoever, that I can get into that mode and get it down, and then you can edit and tidy it up. Whereas with a novel, I've got to stay in someone's head for 8 months or 12 months or whatever it is. And it's quite hard to get back to that. But the flip side is, you know, if I write a short story, it's done, and then I've got to create a new character in a new world. Whereas once I was in Tommy's head, all right, it's growing up as you go through the story, but I'm the same person. So you don't have to reinvent things. So I'm getting to the stage now where I'm longing to get back to a novel.
So is this a standalone novel, or are you following on after this one with a sequel or a trilogy or a whole series?
Well, it was written as a standalone, but I'm learning about, because I spent a lot of time learning how to write, but I didn't know anything about the industry. And what the industry wants is sequels. Because, you know, so you spend all the time, you know, promoting a particular book, and loads of people read it and they like it. Well, you know, yeah, something similar. So anyway, I've just got an idea recently for, you know, I was saying I want to get back to novel writing, for how I might begin a sequel. But and I think I'm not really much of a planner in the terms of, I don't plan out every chapter and all that, because I think it just kills it. So I've got an idea how it might start, and then we'll wing it and we'll see what happens. And I might write myself into a cul-de-sac and waste 6 months and throw it all in the bin, but you've got to have a go, haven't you?
Simon, do you have a strict writing routine? You've got family, kids and all that, so do you set aside a certain time of day or a night, or do you go off to your man cave, or, you know, whatever, or is it just sit down when it comes into your head and go for it?
No, I try and be sort of structured, but it doesn't always work. But I try to write. I try to be at my desk, you know, get the kids out of the house, be at my desk for maybe 9:15. If I can write till 1, that is a top day of work. You know, well, it depends. It might be a disastrous day of work, depends on what comes. But that's the goal, is to do my writing in the morning, because as soon as you start with something else, with real life, then the book doesn't seem quite as real, and which is what I'm all about. You know, you're talking about the opening to The Silent Brother. You know, anybody can sort of tell a story, but I want to tell it as intensely as possible. I want to be as present in it as I possibly can. And obviously, I've got to be in it if I'm going to bring you in it. And I can only be in it if everything else is completely shut out. You know, if I, you know, like a method acting version of
you get into a particular zone, don't you?
Yeah, exactly. I am whoever it is, basically.
Okay. Final question from me, Simon. What advice would you have for a new writer, someone who's got an idea in their head?
Well, write it down, get it out there. But it's a cruel thing, I think, that often we have our best ideas when you're starting out, but you don't have the tools to make a great story. And I think the way it's portrayed is so, just like with Backstories, you know, someone achieves something and it's portrayed as, oh, it's always going to happen. And with writers, it's the same. So-and-so's a genius because they've done this. And it isn't that. You know, it's 90% perspiration. So you'll have a brilliant idea. You'll write your first book. It won't quite work because it takes, just if you were doing some joinery, it takes time to learn how to use all the different tools.
Yeah.
And equally, there could be someone who's brilliant at using all the different tools, but has got no imagination. And what they make is at best utilitarian. You need everything. You need all the ingredients, and you need to persevere. So I suppose if you're going to write, do it for love. It's great fun. It can be great. It can be so satisfying and so absorbing, but it's also very frustrating. So yeah, I mean, do it, but it's tough sometimes, you know.
Just going back to your book again, and the way I know you say you're very structured. Now we find some people start their book at the natural beginning and go through it chapter by chapter until they have an end. Some people come up with an ending and then go back and write it that way around. Is that what's your philosophy on that? Do you find it better to do it structured all the way through, as you've done with Tommy in the kitchen and so on, or is there an ending first? Or
I haven't. I mean, when I wrote The Silent Brother, I wrote the first chapter because the previous book I'd written, which didn't quite work, one of the repeated criticisms was, we don't like your main character. So I thought, right, you're going to like this character. You're going to feel for this character. So I wrote that scene in the kitchen. And I think I wrote chapter 2 first, actually, which is a similar sympathetic kind of thing, and then wrote chapter 1. But basically, I wrote that and then just let the thing evolve. And then at a certain point, occasionally sort of think, where are you going? And at about a third of the way through, I kind of had a slightly opaque version of where the ending was going to be. And so that was always in the distance, but I didn't plan out every path along the way. You know, I knew where the end of the rainbow was, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. Because I think for me, if I over plan it, it lacks emotional force.
Takes away some of the creativity.
Yeah, I mean, it's just got to be real. So if I've got a plan that goes off in a certain direction, and I know my character, I know Tommy, and I know the situation he's in, he's going to choose to do something else. So he chooses to do something else. Or do I shoehorn him into doing the thing I want for my plot that's preset? And then, you know, you're killing it a little bit. So I don't know. I mean, some people do, they plan everything and it works for them, and good luck to them. And it is much safer because, as I say, I'm aware that at any point I could get stuck and think, well, I've got to here. What the hell happens now? So, but yeah, I'm not a big planner, but I plan a bit. And the more, if I get anxious, I try and plan more, and it usually doesn't work for me.
Okay.
Fair enough. Good answer. It's just interesting to get a different perspective on it from different authors, you know. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, cheers. Thanks very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
Well, let's pick another one then when the sequel or the next novel comes along. Or another chat.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I should say, Backstories 2 is about 1 or 2 stories away from completion.
Okay.
So, I mean, hopefully, I'll have something to go to my readers by end of January. So maybe the spring.
Okay.
I would like to think early spring, Backstories 2 will be out. So obviously I'd love to talk about it.
Brilliant. Well, let's keep in touch as we have been doing on Twitter.
All right, cool. Thanks very much. Indeed.
That's okay. But for now, Simon, thank you very much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Right, cheers.
Yeah, cheers.